What was the reaction of the king of Jerusalem to the Gibeonites' peace treaty with Israel? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Joshua on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing Joshua 10 verses 1 to 6, but before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Joshua chapter 10 verse 1, but if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Joshua chapter 10, beginning at verse 1. Now it came to pass when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had taken Ai and utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and its king, so he had done to Ai and its king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel, and were among them, that they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were mighty. Therefore Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent to Horam, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Deber, king of Eglon, saying, Come to me and help me, that we may attack Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel. Therefore the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon gathered together and went up, they and all their armies, and camped before Gibeon, and made war against it. And the men of Gibeon sent to Joshua at the camp at Gilgal, saying, Do not forsake your servants. Come up to us quickly. Save us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites who dwell in the mountains have gathered together against us. In chapter 9, we saw Joshua getting deceived by the Gibeonites into making a treaty with them, all because he didn't consult with the Lord. Had he done so, God would have told him of their deception, thus sparing Israel what would come after. For not only did Israel break a command of God to destroy all the peoples of the land, but because they did so, these peoples would be among those that led Israel into sin in the book of in the book of Judges. We often get ourselves into trouble when we act rashly without considering all the facts. When faced with difficult decisions, pray to God, approach His Word in study, and the wisdom that He supplies will help guide our paths. But the treaty that the Gibeonites made with Israel didn't remain a secret, for the king of Jerusalem, Adonizedek, got wind of it and became angry. The name Adonizedek means Lord of Righteousness, and is comparable to Melchizedek, which means King of Righteousness. Melchizedek we know from the book of Genesis as King of Salem, which became known as Jerusalem. So perhaps Adonizedek, and names like it, is the Jebusite title of the king of Jerusalem, much like Pharaoh is the title for the king of Egypt. Why, though, was the king of Jerusalem angry about this treaty? Well, first of all, he had heard what happened to the kings of Jericho and Ai, how they were both killed, and their cities burned. Israel therefore posed a threat to the king of Jerusalem. On our map, we see that Gibeon is about 8 kilometers or 5 miles from Jerusalem, and so, with at least a neutral ally in the Gibeonites, Joshua would have an easier access to come up to attack Jerusalem. Add to that Gibeon was a great city with mighty men, much larger than Ai, and the king of Jerusalem saw this as an insult, that they would so quickly fold before Israel instead of fighting. So what the king of Jerusalem did was gather together 4 other Amorite kings to go down and attack the Gibeonites. These 4 other kings were the kings of Lachish, Jarmuth, Eglon, and Hebron, cities which are found on your screen outlined in black. These 4 cities laid in the hill country south and west of Jerusalem and would eventually become part of the tribe of Judah. Of these cities, besides Jerusalem, the only one we've seen before is Hebron, which is of course where Abraham lived, and near where the cave of Machpelah would be, the burial place of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob and Leah. The reason to attack Gibeon, again, was twofold. First, it would remove what the king of Jerusalem must have thought to be traitors and deserters to an invading force. But second, and perhaps more importantly, Gibeon is a strategic place to help protect Jerusalem from an attack from the north. The road from Jericho to Jerusalem was already protected by his own troops, but if the king of Jerusalem also controlled Gibeon, he would be able to cut off Israel's access from the north. Why did he thus need to enlist the help of these other 4 kings? Because the city of Gibeon was a strong city with mighty men, and so considerable more men would be needed, not only to defeat the city, but to hold it too. And of course, it was in these other kings' best interest to help, for if Jerusalem fell, they could very well be next. Now when the people of Gibeon saw all the forces coming against it, they sent word to Joshua at Gilgal for the forces of Israel to come and assist them in battle. Why would Joshua need to come to help the Gibeonites? Because of the covenant to keep them alive. That meant that they couldn't allow other nations to kill the Gibeonites in order to release Israel from their poorly made covenant. Thus, instead of advancing further into the promised land, Israel's forces would now have to protect a city that they shouldn't have had to protect had they not made this covenant. What will happen in this battle? That's what we'll discuss, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Joshua chapter 10, verses 7 to 15, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.